Thank you for joining us for the Future of Retirement podcast, where we talk with leaders in the retirement and pension industry about their experiences. Today, I'm joined by Barbara Zvan and Brian Gill of the University Pension Plan in Ontario. Barbara Zvan is the President and Chief Executive Officer at UPP, where she leads strategies to provide lifelong pension security and service excellence to over 41,000 members. Recognized as Canada's 2022 CEO of the Year and Corporate Citizen of the Year by the Global Mail's report on Business Magazine, she is a prominent advocate for defined benefit pensions and responsible investing. And Brian Gill, UPP's Chief Technology Officer, is leading strategic initiatives, technology infrastructure, and data analytics and business intelligence with executive leadership experience across financial services, technology, and gaming. He's known for driving people-focused technology transformation that improves efficiency and customer experience. Barbara and Brian, thank you for joining me today.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. It's great to be here.
Yes, for sure. I'm really looking forward to it.
And I guess I'll start by kind of setting the background, which is our experience working together. So could you guys, and maybe I'll, Barbara, start with you, just help set the stage for introducing UPP, what you guys do and your business model a little bit, and about our partnership together.
Great. So I'll start with UPP and I'll let Brian talk about the partnership. UPP is a bit of an interesting entity. It is a startup pension plan, which is pretty rare in the defined benefit space. So UPP was created over a period of time, which we'll get into a little bit later. But as of July 1st, 2021, we had 3 founding universities that we had to prepare for. Put that in context, the board was created January 1, 2020, and I became their first employee shortly thereafter. So we had about a year to get ready, and we had to be able to oversee the administration, meet any of the requirements where you had to report in aggregate. We had to be the beneficial owner of the assets. And really in terms of what we received at that point was we received the legacy assets, received the legacy plan terms of all these founding universities, and we didn't receive any technology, we didn't receive any people. And so it was really a clean slate. So that is where we started. And then we had to figure out pretty shortly thereafterwards, because what we did to administer these pension plans is we asked their current providers to keep going and administer the pre-conversion, which combined with the new UPP plan. But we had about 3 years to say we're a solution and we will be providing these services ourselves. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brian for the rest of the history.
Okay, well, thank you, Barb. You've heard, Jess, that UPP is a newer defined benefit pension plan. And one of the advantages of being newer is that we had the opportunity to start with a blank page with our technology architecture and then build intentionally right from the start. So our relationship with Majesco goes back nearly to the beginning of our organization with Vitek, actually, before it became part of the Majesco family. And together we've worked to bring the Velocity platform into the Canadian pension market. And we've done that with the very complex Ontario University plans that Barb mentioned. And Ontario University plans aren't exactly the shallow end of the pension pool. They're quite intricate. If there's something I learned as we've been going through the process, it may look deceptively simple, pension administration from the outside, but it's wonderfully complicated. And over the last number of years, as we've onboarded universities and continued to grow, the relationship with Majesco has been really incredibly important. When you're doing something ambitious, something complicated, those relationships matter, often every bit as much as the technology itself. And together, we've really worked on some complex issues. We've solved problems and overcome a number of challenges, occasionally sitting around the virtual table or the real table together, looking at something thinking, well, that's pretty interesting. We've had to figure it out together. And through that have really developed a depth of relationship that's quite strong. With that depth of connection, the partnership, and it exists at every level from the working teams right up to Barb and the head of the Majesco retirement and pension product line. With those folks working together day by day, you end up sharing the same scars.
So as the journey, and you guys have had a unique, distinctive journey, talking about really being able to start kind of in a fresh technology refresh as well. But can you talk about UPP and how you began and what you set out to achieve and some of the challenges that you kind of met initially at the outset?
Sure. So I'll give the quick version of the history lesson because it's actually decades long. People might remember something called the global financial crisis.
Yes.
So it was at that time where the university sector, who were all running their own pension plans, so they were considered single employer pension plans. Markets fell dramatically, interest rates fell, and they had big deficits that they had to fund from their operating budgets. And that was, quite burdensome, right? They had to give up things to make sure that they can meet those pension benefits. They were then looking over in Ontario, when I worked at another large pension plan for about 25 years, the province, which is the group in Canada that oversees pension, created something called a jointly sponsored pension plan designation. So you had the single employer and you had this jointly sponsored. And the key to this jointly sponsored was that the employer and employees are part of governance through their representatives. And so they're making decisions jointly. They share the costs jointly, and they share the risk of running this pension plan jointly. And if you have those and you are designated a jointly sponsored pension plan, the rules were different for you. Mainly that you can fund this plan uniquely with just a long-term view. And you didn't have to do something that was called a solvency valuation, which is using today's rates, market value of your assets, are you fully funded in case you went bankrupt? And that was what was really painful and part of the university's balance sheets was that valuation. So they looked and said, well, how did you manage to get jointly sponsored? Well, it kind of just happened. The province in 2005, a few years before the global financial crisis, designated 6 plans with this criteria. But they didn't really say how you became one. How do you go from a single employer plan to a jointly sponsored plan? And so that took, call it 5 years to figure out, mainly because folks were still working through the global financial crisis. And then they had to put their minds to how would you become one? And at the same time, ensuring that certain things like conditional inflation protection, ability to share risk across all members were embedded. And so that took 5 years, call it, so 2013-ish. And then it took another 5 for them to actually sit down. There's about 30 universities in the province to say, how will this work? So 30 universities, 30 employers, 30 faculty associations, and many different unions, right? So you are having hundreds of people in the room. At some point, they said, maybe we should go down to 3, right? So there's a progression down to 3. And that was when they actually could sit down and say, okay, how will this work, right? And they created the governance structure. They created the plan design. And so there's a long history of the university sector working together to build UPP for the university sector. And so we say UPP is built by and for the university sector, and it's overseen by the university sector. So it's really catering to this group. I would say it's a defined benefit pension plan. What they codified as the benefits as you come in is kind of a classic defined benefit with conditional inflation protection. So we pay it as long as we can afford it. And so there's the kind of the origins. So the opportunity here is taking all these disparate pension plans and bringing them together. And on the investment side, where I spent most of my career, there's immediate cost savings when you're going from managing something to below $1 billion to now 15 and hopefully double that billion, right? You can negotiate better deals. You can be in asset classes that you can't be. And on the member side, there's portability. So you can work now at one university, move to another. As long as they're in UPP, you have no breaks in service, right? You still accumulate those plans. And on the pension services side, hopefully with scale, we can provide a service that's really customized to what they need. But the downside, the challenge is the way that they designed this plan. Someone referred to us as a complexity consolidator. That's what we do and what we need to get really good at as a skill. So the way that this plan provision was created is we keep all those legacy plan terms, and that member keeps their service on those plan terms. And then we take the new plan, and the best technical term is smoosh them together, apply their new salaries to everything. So now what do we have? We've grown from 3 to 6 universities, but that was actually 9 pension plans to administer with multiple types of defined benefit, hybrid, etc. We also have 21 now small affiliated employers with the university sector. So we go from very large to very small. Our plan text is 860-ish pages already. Most pension plans are 80. We're already 10 times. Taking it also with the way that many people work at a university sector, they have very complicated work arrangements, which means we need a tool to handle all this complexity, not just from a calculation point of view, but the data model that underlines that, the sophistication of it. It needs to be able to manage this complexity, and we need to do it really well, because that is what we actually have to attract the other universities to join. It is not mandatory. That's why the work with Majesco is really important, because we need a good partner to provide a really stable and basically an awesome tool that the members experience and the employer experience is positive.
Terrific. Wow, thank you. I'm kind of curious as a follow-on to that then, and maybe Brian, for you, in enabling the smushing of these plans and enabling that technological term that you just highlighted, Barbara, that smush, obviously not being weighted down by, let's say, legacy technology or old platforms and things like that has probably been a benefit. I'm thinking in terms of practical terms, how did you manage your technology process and in selecting the right tools to put together to be able to smush the plans together? And then obviously you deal with the scale that you're growing rapidly as you add these new plans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jess, thank you for that question. Really important opportunity for us as we started with a fairly clean slate, as I mentioned, and we were determined not to waste that. When you consider organizations that have decades of technology and layers of customization, our opportunity was different. How do we become sophisticated enough to handle the kind of complexity that Barb talked about without creating that kind of legacy background? So we took the challenge of creating technical debt very much as a health risk to the organization and not a rite of passage. So it was important that we start clean and we keep clean right from the beginning. So the capabilities that we saw in the Velocity platform very much fit the bill for us. It was a modern technology that operated in the cloud. We were able to configure as opposed to customize. And we found, as we brought more and more universities on, we can repeat the configuration process over and over and add the layers of complexity that Barb was talking about into the platform. So that was really the approach with Majesco, and continues to be the approach today, to leverage what we put in place to add sophistication and complexity and have the platform absorb that as we continue to bring new universities into the configuration. Good complexity absorbs the kind of, or good technology absorbs the kind of complexity that Barb was talking about. And so that's what we're seeking to achieve with Majesco working side by side.
So part of starting a new UPP was also having a new board. So there was 14 board members as of January 1st, 2020, many of which this was their first experience. They're definitely first time they were getting together as a board. They didn't have a rhythm, operating guidelines. None of that was built. Right? And there was something called COVID right up there. So even then meeting in person became impossible or incredibly difficult. But what we did do before Brian's arrival was spend a bit of time with the board saying we could do it ourselves. Not possible. We could outsource the whole thing to a partner, and we're thinking that doesn't really lead to cost efficiency and innovation and what the members wanted, which I'll come back to. So some sort of co-source model where we're leveraging a partner was seen as the ideal solution. That helped set off the search that we eventually led to the successful Jessica winning that search with Velocity. One other thing we did was we also went out to our members at the time and said, what's really important to you? Like we all kind of had our preconceived notions. And it came back, I would say, three things consistently. First and foremost was use plain language. Lawyers at the end of the line, right? With plain language, a tool that uses plain language was really important, make it really easy for a member to use. Providing tools that the members can use on their free time. So again, thinking of some of the functionality within Velocity, so they can play around and understand their pensions. And when they're ready to make a decision, they have someone to speak to, no chat box, but speak to, make sure that they're understanding the information correctly. And those three things also led to informing what type of tool that we would like ultimately to and partner to be with us in this journey.
That's great. As a follow-up, you talked about handling the complexity, dealing with the setting up of a lot of these things. And I suppose there's a lot of kind of adaptation, if you will, or remaining agile in terms of being able to handle, I think in as about this new volume that you're taking on more universities than you thought you would initially take on and getting them up and running more quickly than you thought maybe you would have to. How has having a modern platform enabled you to be agile and adapt to that change?
Yeah, it's a terrific aspect of the organization that I saw when I was joining. I joined, as Barb mentioned, after the wheels were up on the airplane, right? And so I found an organization that was moving fast, really incredibly quickly, but with intention. And that's quite rare, rarer than people probably think. I've seen other organizations that move fast but have no idea where they're going, and I've seen some that move slow and still have no idea where they're going. So somehow UPP was managing to avoid both. So that was really a tantalizing aspect of the environment that I joined. It was crazy, fun, clearly headed somewhere. So as we continue to grow and add universities in, the challenge is that growth, but also the challenge is growing without losing what made us a successful organization in the first place. To be able to grow, to stay ambitious, to stay agile, and leverage what we put in place, resisting the natural urge that every organization has to create 17 committees to solve a three-person problem. So that's the approach that we're applying at the psyche level. Keep it simple, fit for purpose, and streamlined as possible with the complexity that we're trying to bring in.
Jessica, the onboarding with every university is I will say quite unique. It really depends on the circumstances. Sometimes, we aren't able to actually get in there early enough to be able to give Jessica the requirements. Right? Is sometimes the span is too short, and so just having a good partner that will work with us. Because sometimes it looks like an orange, and other days it looks like an apple. It's just, but that start date for that university, I will just say it's codified in the regulatory framework of when they become a JSPP or they onboard us, so it's immovable. The only thing we can do is figure out how to bring them on the time span that they give us. It's really, you can't say no.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I can see the challenges. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned earlier, Barbara, I think you talked about data and data cleansing and things like that being very important. And as you guys continue to grow and adding new universities, just kind of curious, what are the biggest challenges that you face in this growth, and then in supporting strong member experiences and everything else, and then all these new institutions coming on board? What are the underlying things like data and things like that? How does that impact the overall member experience and honestly, just your success overall?
Yeah, so we mentioned the complexity consolidators. We take the plan terms as is. There's no simplifying. So I would say we have a hybrid plan today that has 25 different levels of indexing for its retirees, another that has 6. One university has 3 pension plan, another university has 2. So complexity is us. We have to accept it and get really well. And that leads to then having a very complicated data model. So it's not just data cleansing, it's how do we structure this data? How do we store this data so that we can maximize what is cost efficient to put within the system, right? There's always going to be a percentage that is just not cost effective. And working with you guys, we have figured out what that balance is, right? And when we look at the total that's not on the system, we're still at or where consulting firms are when they onboard a normal plan. So we're thinking we're doing pretty well given the complexity of this plan. So I think our challenges are our opportunities, right? So if we can get really good at managing this complexity and the data underneath, and how we get that data from the employer in the smoothest possible way possible. And so there's less Q&A, less back and forth. It makes everybody's experience positive because that data quality combined with the great calculation ability of the system leads to all those things that the members really want. So we talked about the tools. To have an estimator for a member, you actually really need a good calculator and solid data quality. And so that becomes a huge enabler because many of them don't have it today. And hopefully we can provide a version that is better than what they have today or ultimately will have today. So I would say all of that is having a good partner in Majesco to help us because we never exactly know the timeline or the circumstances we're dealing with. We can have a planning date, but that may change. And just having the flexible partner at the other end has been great. I would say also the other challenge we have is now that we're hitting our 5th birthday, which is crazy, where we went from 1 employee need to 260. We have also rising expectations, right? You have this world of AI, people used to their phones and getting information immediately. So it just raises the whole bar in terms of what people are expecting. So, what does the estimator look like? Well, we're already starting that dialogue with some of the advisory folks that we reach out to. What does the estimator 2.0 look like? How do we get better engagement of 30-year-old with a different estimator so that we can communicate to you those requirements well in advance? So I would say, and there's also, we get lots of requests of, can you combine my UPP pension with the social programs that we have? Canada is called Old Age Security that everyone gets and anyone working earns a Canadian pension plan. So the requirements just go up. So we need a partner that's willing to work with us to figure out how to do that. So I would just say partners, technology, data are really enablers for meeting the requirements of our members at the end of the day.
I'd be missing something if we didn't at least talk a little bit about AI and the role it's playing in helping you guys with this growth and everything else. What are the areas that you see AI having the most impact on your business today?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in at this point,
Yeah.
Jess. Everybody's certainly talking about AI right now. We're hearing it everywhere. Lots of excitement and a lot of really impressive developments around what AI can do for organizations like us. You've heard from us already that pension administration is a very complex business. If you've taken nothing from the last 20 minutes of discussion, other than that, then, it's not breaking news anymore, right? So one of the biggest opportunities I see with AI is helping our teams manage and navigate the complexity that we're consolidating together more confidently and more quickly. For instance, when a member contacts UPP, they don't want to hear about how complicated pensions are. They just want a clear answer. And if AI can help our teams find the information faster, understand the context of that information more easily, and provide more consistent approach, then I think that's valuable use of AI. I certainly see opportunities as well in simplification of processes and the reduction of some of the administration burden that just comes naturally with such complex pension plans. Most of all, and I think it's important that if we use AI and stay focused on the outcomes, not the technology, the goal necessarily isn't AI. The goal is confidence for our members. And if members get better answers, faster answers, and a better overall experience, then I think collectively we'll have used AI well.
Yeah, I'll add to that. As someone who has to manage the budget, keeping costs down is always welcomed by our sponsors and universities, right, and members who have to pay for it. So that's also one of the productivity tools. I would say that one thing that came out of our strategy, a cute quote, I would say, is one of the board members said, "No one has ever met a chatbot they like." So we won't be offering a chat box to our members, but as Brian mentioned, enabling the internal team to be able to get those responses quicker is huge. And maybe just one example from the onboarding experience. When we have a new university onboarding, we can say, this university looks a lot like that one that we already onboarded. And using AI, you can very quickly go to the plan text and say, what's the same and what's different? Which means we can get specs to you even sooner, right? So there's a lot of advantages, especially to go through document-rich processes, I would say, to really speed them up.
I think those are great examples, and I mean, it's so exciting the direction you guys are heading in really making a very complex system up in Ontario in your area, simplifying it for members and really improving their experience. I'm just kind of curious as you look to the future, and this will be our last question, but if you had to choose one word or phrase that describes the future of retirement and pension, what would it be and why?
Sure, I'll go with essential. So I've been in pensions for now almost 35 years.
Okay.
It's usually the biggest or the second biggest asset of a person or a family. Right? It's usually home and pensions. And so that is really the retirement security. Unfortunately, people probably only pay attention to it when they get to 50. But really, you need to start thinking about it sooner to be able to really save for the longevity that we're experiencing and the different work patterns. So I would say it's absolutely essential to ensure, you get to enjoy your retirement with financial security.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a very interesting question. And so if I had to choose a phrase, for me, I'd say it's personal. And let me explain a little bit about what I mean by that, Jess. Earlier in my career, retirement felt like something way off in the distance. But I'm at a stage in my career now where retirement isn't about somebody else's future or that milestone way down in the future. It's something I can see clearly as my future too. And I really think that changes how you think about the work that we do every day. When I think about the members we serve, it's easier to put myself into their shoes. At the end of the day, I think we're all trying to answer the same kind of question. Am I going to be okay? And to me, that's a pretty meaningful question to spend your career helping people answer.
Wow, absolutely. That is a great way to end this call. I really appreciate you both, not only for joining me today, but also the mission that you've taken to make retirement and pension more simple for people to understand and get access to. It's been terrific for me. For all of us here at Majesco, we thank you for listening and thank you for all joining us today. Thanks for joining me on Future of Retirement. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to follow the series. And for more insights, join us at majesco.com. And from all of us here at Majesco, here's to shaping your next now.